it's going to be myself and TP Square, and we're going to have the Brother Hour. And we're going to talk about issues affecting brothers. And three brothers come to mind right off the top. And that's Kanye West, Kyrie Irving, and now Dave Chappelle. So we know the story with Kanye. Kanye kind of went off the deep end. Did he have some legitimate concerns as related to his contract? Possibly. In fact, maybe. But I think when he started talking about DEFCON 3 on Jewish people, I think that took away from the legitimacy of his argument, right? And then you had Kyrie Irving. And Kyrie Irving is kind of interesting. I have a lot of respect for this young man because he stands for what he believes in. He said, look, I'm not taking no damn vaccine. Even if it costs me my career, I'm not taking your vaccine. So he stood by that. And they allowed him back out on the court. Well, then there's a movie out called Hebrews to Negroes. You seen it?
No, I haven't seen it.
Okay. So you can order it on Amazon, or you can see it, it's an audio book, you can see it. You can rent it.
Amazon Prime, right?
Yeah. I think it's just regular Amazon. They'll actually send you DVD.
Okay.
Or Amazon Prime, you can watch the video. But anyway, what Kyrie did, I think he linked the movie to his Facebook page or in social media.
Twitter.
It was Twitter. And of course, it kind of ignited a firestorm where they said it was anti-Semitic. And then they said, we need you to bow down and apologize. And he said no. He later gave somewhat of an apology, which I thought was sufficient, but it wasn't perceived that way. So they suspended him. I think the suspension at one point became indefinite. But what he did was something that is done every day. It's a common thing. People share things. We don't really go and fact check everything we share. You know what I mean? If you see something and you like it, you might hit the like button. You might hit the share button. Who's to say if Kyrie Irving actually saw this movie? All he did was share it to his social media. And of course, they said there were anti-Semitic tropes in the movie. Well, what are these anti-Semitic tropes? I mean, I think the problem is, or I should say, I know the problem is that people will say, okay, this is anti-Semitic, but won't explain why. What makes it anti-Semitic? Why is it that what Dave Chappelle said on the SNL monologue was offensive, but for years, Don Rickles would make statements that were racist and stereotypical in the form of a joke, and nobody said a word. That was okay. But for Dave Chappelle and his monologue, and I listened to his entire monologue, and I didn't hear anything that I saw or thought to be offensive. Now, okay, I'm not part of the Jewish community, but what was so offensive? And I think that somebody needs to explain, hey, Dave, this is what we found offensive. Hey, Kyrie, this is what we found offensive. But that's not what happens. What happens is something like what Kyrie did. He shares it, or Dave Chappelle does his monologue. And the response is anti-Semitism. Well, what do you consider anti-Semitic?
Everything.
What specifically did he say?
Everything is anti-Semitic.
And see, that's a problem, right? Because it's difficult not to offend someone if you don't know what offends them. And nobody comes out from the community and says, well, this is what offends us. And look, I get it. You know, certain things you should not say because they are meant to be mean-spirited, meant to offend. But if you disagree with someone, can you be considered anti-Semite because you disagree? If I don't agree with how Israel is treating the Palestinians, and I say, no, I don't think it's right, am I anti-Semitic for saying that?
Technically speaking, in the eyes of those folks, yes, because you're speaking out against something that they're doing, or you're speaking out against them in their eyes. Because keep in mind, according to the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
they are the chosen people, right?
Well, now here's the thing. See that movie, Hebrews to Negroes. That movie says that there is a factual basis to say that black people are the original Jews. That black people are the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Well,
and not them.
If you look at the world and what the scholars say, even the Jewish scholars, right?
Mhm.
Scientists, genetics, everything clearly points that the black man is the father of civilization.
Absolutely.
And they have said it over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Black man is the father of civilization. And even when they go and dig up all these graves that's centuries old and they look at the remains, who are they?
Right.
You know what I mean? So if we're talking about biblical times, those people that walk the earth and that biblical time that they're talking about
Mm-hmm.
look like me and you.
Well, here's the thing. So, Egypt, or Kemet, as it is actually known, is probably 6,000 years old or more, right? Probably the world's first civilization, advanced civilization. And right now, you can go and you can see the mummified remains of Kemetic kings and queens, and people who were scholars, people of note in Kemet. You can see their remains. What you cannot find are the remains of Moses, Isaac, Abraham, none of them. So how is it, 7,000 years ago, you can find evidence that these people existed, but centuries later, you cannot find evidence that any of these people that we find in the biblical text, we can't find any evidence that they existed. But that's based on belief. But, is there a biblical and factual basis for Kyrie Irving and others to believe that black people could be the original Jews or the original Hebrews? Now, if that is so erroneous, why doesn't somebody come and explain this and show Kyrie Irving and others proof that no, this can't be? But see, it's one thing to say, okay, it's anti-Semitic. It's another thing to show me factually where there is no basis for my belief. Nobody's going to do that.
Well, I can say this much.
Mm-hmm.
I love history,
Mm-hmm.
right? I love math and science. Math and science is one and the same,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the nerd in me, I'm a truth seeker,
Mm-hmm.
So I want to hear both sides of the argument.
That makes sense.
Right? I want to hear both sides of the argument. And you know what? When most people are distracted by drill music, or they're distracted by the Housewives of Atlanta,
Mm-hmm.
Reality TV stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not distracted by that type of stuff. My distractions are truth seeking, knowledge,
Right.
Wanting to have knowledge of self to know from whence I came, right? So when I do that, I'm watching all those shows on television, the National Geographics and all that stuff. And I'm watching the stuff when they're excavating these Egyptian grave sites,
Mm-hmm.
and they're removing these bodies, and they're looking at them, and I'm listening to what these scholars are saying, right? And most of those scholars that's doing that don't look like me and you.
Right.
Because we're distracted in most cases, even on that intellectual level, we're distracted. But the people that's seeking the knowledge is going and showing it to us are people of Caucasian descent, right? Because at the end of the day, I believe, it's just my opinion, that when people say that our history is being whitewashed, I gotta believe that. Because when you show me that we've been here for 6,000 years and there's nobody there that looked like you,
right,
and everybody looks like me, well, that's actual and factual that we are the fathers of civilization and that we are the descendants of all those people they're talking about in the Bible.
Okay. So this discussion that we had, is this an anti-Semitic discussion?
Well, from my perspective, no. And
from mine as well.
But I've watched some documentaries, right? And, just like that book, The 50-Year Plan, we talked about that before. There has been a system put in place to keep us in the dark, keep us asleep, right? Keep us in bondage. And what was said on one of these documentaries that was recorded in the 60s, I believe, 50s or 60s, it was after World War II. And the gentleman was explaining that whenever somebody speak out against us, the first thing that we interject is the Holocaust. They want to get pity for the Holocaust. Ain't nothing wrong with that. But if that don't work, label them an anti-Semite. And it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter what they said. But in order to bring them to their knees after you inject the Holocaust, then you label them an anti-Semite, the world come crumbling down against them. Just like today, modern day in America, we're not talking about, being an anti-Semite or anything like that, right? Up until Donald Trump's presidency, right? The worst thing you could call a person wanted to be considered was a racist,
right?
Because that was a label that nobody wants. Just like nobody want to be labeled a racist, because that can affect you in your job. It can affect you socially, right? Because what you believe and think inside your house is your business, and those are your personal beliefs, and those are your beliefs, nobody else's. But it ain't your right. It's not your right to force your beliefs on other people. So if you're labeled a racist, you could be a racist in your house all the time. You can call me the N-word all day long. Just don't call me the N-word in public. Right? Because if you call me that in public, now you're a racist. Right? So it's the same thing. Because if you can lose your job by being labeled a racist, what do you think you're going to lose? What's going to happen to you if you're labeled an anti-Semite?
Well, that's kind of what's happening with Kanye West, Kyrie Irving, and Dave Chappelle. We don't know the full extent of the fallout from what's going to happen with this monologue, right? But some people have come out against. I think the ADL spoke out. Jerry Seinfeld, he said that there needs to be a conversation with Dave Chappelle. I think we all need to have a conversation.
Well, that's the issue, in my opinion. We talk at each other.
Right.
We don't talk to each other.
Exactly.
And we have to be able to have an understanding. You know what I mean? Like, for instance, I would not get into a room of people who are Jewish and tell them that you're not the Jews of the Bible. You're not the original Jew. I wouldn't have that conversation with them because you know what? That's going to be offensive to them. because they were taught to believe that we are the chosen people. That's their belief. They believe that. And it ain't my job to tell them who you are. They know who they are, right? But if you allow science and facts and history to tell them who they are, I think it'll be more acceptive.
Well,
And I think that'll take away the labeling, you know what I mean? Because it's nothing wrong with that. Because guess what? I believe in Jesus Christ. I believe in Jesus Christ, right? Because I was brought up in a Christian household. And I believe that there's a heaven and a hell. I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. I believe that. That's my belief, right? And if you come and tell me that I'm wrong because that's my belief, I really have nothing to label you. Because if I call you an atheist, it's okay to be an atheist. You don't have to believe, right? But I don't have the power or the privilege to label you, give you a title like an anti-Semite because you don't believe in Jesus Christ. You don't believe that Jesus is the Son of God. You don't believe in Christianity. You know what I mean? You're not a follower of Jesus Christ. So we can't label you anything else because there was never given a label to call somebody that other than atheist, right? So what I'm saying is everybody's entitled to their beliefs. And in this country, we do have freedom of speech. You know,
we used to have
freedom of speech, but supposedly we have freedom of speech. You know, right is right and wrong is wrong. Don't tell me that you can promote negativity that's aimed at my community, right? And you can finance it and you can benefit off it, right? And you can laugh all the way to the bank, right? But it's our fault that happens to us.
But you know, that's Kanye's argument, right? And that's been the argument that has been raised throughout periods in history, right? Where, particularly in the entertainment industry, some got rich while the entertainers did not receive fair compensation. Put it like that, right?
That's always the case.
It is. And, you know, did Kanye West have a legitimate argument to say that, well, my contract did not favor me, it favored others? And if Kanye would have said that, well, there are others who said the same thing. I believe Michael Jackson had a problem with Sony Music. I think it's Sony Music. Then you had Prince. Prince went as far as to change his name to the artist formerly known as Prince to get out of his contract. And this is not something that is new to us. This has been going on for, you know, generations, right? But getting back to a conversation, you know, with people of different beliefs, specifically Jewish people. So if you read the Bible, you are a biblical scholar. According to history, Noah and his family were on an ark, and they were the only people left on earth. Everybody else had been destroyed in this massive flood. Well, the Bible says when the ark came to rest, two of Noah's sons, Ham and Shem, went south, and they lived in neighboring cities. The cities that Shem lived in, who is the father of the Semites, they didn't specifically name them. They did, however, name the cities that his brother Ham lived in. And those cities are Punt, Misraim, and Ethiopia. It said that Shem lived in neighboring cities. So what we have is one brother is establishing civilizations in Africa and another brother in neighboring cities. So if this establishment or if these civilizations are occurring in Africa, who are the real Semitic people? Are we dealing with the people that we see the Ashkenazim and the Sephardic Jewish people. Are they the original Jewish people? Or what do these people look like who established these civilizations in Africa?
Well, you have to go back to science, and you have to go back all the way back to Pangea,
Mm-hmm.
right? When the land mass was one,
Mm-hmm.
surrounded by water.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I don't know how far back you have to go for Pangea, but let's just say that ark landed during the time of Pangea.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And the suns went south, right? Naturally, they're not going to go too far apart from each other
Mm-hmm.
because there's strength in numbers. They might need each other, right? So that's why they say in neighboring cities. And because Ethiopia is probably one of the oldest named countries in Africa,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we have to say, okay, they were on a landmass that's known today as Africa.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, as the land began to split up, I'm sure there were people on all parts of the different land, and as it split, it separated the people.
Mm-hmm.
But that's going back to science. All right. So when you have this conversation, what I'm getting at is that when you have this conversation with people, you have to inject science and world history into the conversation, because we all got our own beliefs.
Right.
You know what I mean? And everybody's entitled to their own beliefs. You know, like I said, I respect Jewish people. I respect Muslim people, Arab people, Native Americans, the African American. I respect everybody's wishes, right? In their beliefs. But one of the worst things that ever was exposed and let out into the world was the science of DNA.
Right.
DNA don't lie.
It does not.
And because of DNA, you can go back and trace one's roots
Back to its origin.
all the way back to its origin.
And you raised an interesting point. So you said everybody is entitled to their belief.
Yes.
But what about Kyrie Irving? So if his belief is, say, what he's, and I don't know if you saw this video, but if his belief is that this video may be correct, it may be on point, is he entitled to believe that?
Yes, he's entitled to believe that.
But
because what gets me with the whole thing is,
mm-hmm.
right is wrong is wrong, right? How can I be punished for my belief?
But that's what's happening. And not just, Kyrie Irving, Kanye West, and he's kind of in a different category. Kanye West, some people say he's a genius, and he quite possibly is, but he's also someone that has that deals with mental illness. He struggles with that, right? So he's in a bit of a different category.
Well,
but
hold on.
Dave Chappelle.
Hold on.
Right?
Let me stop you right there.
Mm-hmm.
Kanye's mental illness is a label.
No, he takes medication.
We know he takes medication because guess what? Every child in the public school system and in the Catholic school system takes medication. They give them Ritalin and they give them Adderall and all the stuff.
Labeled ADHD.
If they're labeled, and if they're labeled bipolar.
Mm-hmm.
Now, sometimes I believe that stress of the world creates mental illness.
It does.
It will put you in a place. And when you see so much, it'll put you in a place. Let me give you an example of stress. My backup plan to music was to be an undertaker, to be a mortician. I don't know if I ever told you the story.
No, you didn't.
Right? So I worked and I did a little internship in a funeral parlor up in Harlem in the 90s, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had a simple job, retrieve the bodies, bring them downstairs, put them on the table, prepare them for embalming. I didn't embalm, but just to prepare them for that,
Mm-hmm.
I was basically a grunt learning the business, right? After the body was dressed, put in the casket, and in the evenings when they were having wakes, I would be there, to monitor the wake, make sure everything runs smoothly, right? And after a while, the stress of the job changed my mind
Mm-hmm.
because I got tired of seeing the same people over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And I can sit and do a wake, right? And look around the audience and say, who's next? Who am I going to pick up next?
Right.
Right? And lo and behold, during the crack era, in the early 90s, in Harlem, it was a lot of death and destruction.
Oh,
right?
Was it?
So it got to a point where one day I'm frustrated because I thought this, who am I going to pick up next? Well, to make a long story short, one day at a wake, I'm frustrated. I see the same people, the same young people. And I'm a young man myself.
Right.
And it's tough to go pick up people that look just like you, that's your age, younger, but your age, a little older, and they're all shot in the head.
Mm-hmm.
They're all shot up, right? People have no idea what a bullet does to a human body. Just like people take for granted, they talk about a 9mm. A 9mm does a lot of damage.
Mm-hmm.
A 38 does a lot of damage,
Mm-hmm.
right? 22 don't do that much damage, but them 9mm and them 38s do a lot of damage. So I see the effects of it,
Mm-hmm.
right? I know that their organs were stolen, because there were certain things that we would see. Death was always 9 a.m. on the death certificate or 9 p.m. In between the times when normally the operating rooms are being used to clean. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But that's another story. But anyway, during this particular night, I'm so frustrated. We're closing at 9 o'clock. So everybody surrounds this casket at 8:30. They just start hovering around the casket. It's 5 minutes. It's a quarter to. I get up and say my little speech, about we're closing at 9, blah, 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 blah. Funerals tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. If you get here early before that, we'll have the casket open, blah, 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 right?
Mm-hmm.
So now it's 5 minutes to 9. I say it again. My anxiety is high. I'm stressed out. 9 o'clock come. I pardon me, excuse me, and I push through the people in front of the casket and I close the casket. Bang. Everybody said, what you doing? I said, it's 9 o'clock. We close. Y'all got to leave. I lost compassion for the people because of the mental stress of me picking up these people in the same community. And this particular funeral home that I worked in was very popular,
Mm-hmm.
So it was the go-to place because Mr. D, it was at Marion Day Danielson's son on 136th Street, right? He worked with the families who didn't have money.
Mm-hmm.
He worked with the community, right? He was a pillar in the community. So a lot of people couldn't afford to go to Unity. Unity didn't give you a break, but Mr. D gave you. He worked with you. So as they were telling me, ready to kick my butt, I turned around in a room full of people and said, if y'all loved him, he wouldn't be here. I said, if y'all loved him, he wouldn't be here. I look around the room, which one of y'all I'm going to pick up next? Now the whole place, they going nuts. There was one man who saved me that day. He was an older gentleman from the community, and he would always come up and speak. And he always talked about trying to tell the young people that we got to do better. And he said, no, don't be mad at him. He's right. Because at this point, I'm crying. Who's next? Who am I going to pick up next?
Mhm.
Which one of y'all going to be? Because he was here 2-3 weeks ago. And your other friend the week before that was here a month before. So which one of y'all going to be next? So I literally had a nervous breakdown from stress. Is that not a mental problem?
You know, I'll tell you something, right? So in the 90s, I was a paramedic in New York City, right?
Mm-hmm.
I started as an EMT in 1989 and went back, got additional training to be a paramedic. So I was out there on the front line.
Mm-hmm.
So I would be one of the first persons that got to somebody who just been shot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now understand the mental stress, the anguish that people go through. Everybody can't stand seeing these sites on a daily basis. A lot of people I work with had a substance abuse problem because that's how they coped, right? With what the images that they saw. And, you know, during this time, you know, in the crack era, you saw some horrific things. You know, it's kind of mind-boggling what humans will do to one another. So I get it, right? And for Kanye West, perhaps that is what happened to him. I know it was difficult for him when he lost his mother. He was very, very close, you know, from all accounts, very, very close to his mother. His mother supported him, supported his music, so on and so forth. But with that being said, Kanye said he takes medication. And sometimes he stops taking medication because he says it affects his ability to be creative. And look, I worked in the medical field. I've heard this so many times where people say the medication makes them feel a certain way. It affects their eating. It affects their sex drive. Some of them are in such high doses, it seems as if they're zombies, right? From these really high dose psychotropic drugs. I get it. So that's why I kind of put Kanye in somewhat of a different class than
But
Kyrie and
but I agree with you
and
about the
Dave
mental.
Chappelle.
I agree with you with Kanye and the mental illness.
Mhm.
But my point is, where did it come from? You know what I mean?
Right.
Because like some people are born with a mental illness,
Mhm.
right? And most geniuses are close to being mental anyway,
Right.
in my opinion.
Right.
But what I'm saying is sometimes traumatic brain injuries don't have to be physical, because you can close your eyes, but you can't turn your ears off.
That's true.
You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
what passes your ear gate will affect you as just as much your eyes see.
Mhm.
And when you connect the dots, it's overwhelming, because like for me, I laugh sometimes. You know, I laughed at the Dave Chappelle joke when he said he was wanting to hang out on Friday night with his Jewish friends, and then he asked the question, why some of y'all people dress like Run DMC? That was
Right.
fun. That was funny to me.
Right. Right.
You know what I mean? That was very funny to me.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make him an anti-Semite? No, because he made a comparison of the black hat and the black leather
Mhm.
jacket and the clothes. Only difference was they might not wear a leather jacket, but
Right.
if you looked at them and you put Run DMC side by side, guess what? They were dressed alike.
But then again, Dave Chappelle was saying this from the perspective of a teenager,
Yes.
right? And if you don't understand something, right, you might have some silly questions to ask somebody because you don't know. I mean, you know, for me, and you probably know what it was like. See, I was bused, right, across town. I was bused to an all Caucasian neighborhood to go to school. So I never encountered Jewish people before. I never encountered Catholic people before. You know, my neighborhood, everybody was for the most part Southern Baptist, Church of God in Christ, stuff like that. So for me to be thrust into that environment, I don't know. I don't know about a Sabbath. I don't know what a yarmulke is. I don't know what it is to go to religious instruction and have a priest come to you and give you the host and confession. I've never heard of this stuff. So,
But-
of course, you're going to have questions. This is something that is new to you. So Dave Chappelle his joke was from the perspective of a kid,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
With questions about something he wasn't sure about. But, it was funny. And again, I raised the point of, say, somebody like Don Rickles, right? So Don Rickles was a comedian, just like Dave Chappelle. And as a comedian, you're paid to make people laugh. That's your job. And sometimes you're going to do it at somebody's expense. You don't mean to offend anybody. The idea is to get the crowd to laugh.
Well, you know what? Let's go back to systemic racism right quick.
Okay.
Why can't we, people that look like me and you,
Mm-hmm.
be systemic racists? Because guess what?
We're not in control of the system.
But we're not in control of the system. But what I'm saying is, everybody got a word for a black man.
Yeah.
Everybody has a word,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just because you don't call me nigger, but you have a word for nigger
Mm-hmm.
in your dialect, right? Does that make you a racist?
That is a good question, right? I don't think it necessarily makes you a racist to use the word. I was listening to basically I guess you'd call it a speech, right, by a theologian, and he said that sometimes there's something known as a mobocracy, where the mob rules. And see, what happens is sometimes you get caught up into the emotion of it all. So let's say you hanging out with your friends, right? And we're going back in the 80s. We're teenagers at this time. And, you out on the corner with the fella just kicking it, right? Well, something happens. Somebody says something and, somebody says something in response. And next thing you know, everybody's caught up into this beef. You don't even know this person. You're not part of this whole situation, but you out there with the fellas. So you get caught up in this too, right? And I guess that can happen with the use of, I guess, slang or slurs, racial slurs. You hear other people saying it, and you out there with them, and you're like, yeah, because it's the mob mentality, right?
Right.
I don't think it necessarily makes you a racist. I think that, just that people sometimes get caught up in things. I think what makes you, in my opinion, what makes you a racist is when you deny others opportunity. When you believe that I'm better than you simply because your skin color is lighter. When you say that I'm going to make it more difficult for you to climb the corporate ladder or to get out, to become a civil service worker. I'm gonna put barriers in your way. To me, that's what makes you a racist. Just to say a racial slur, or an ethnic slur, I don't think that makes you necessarily racist. It's not going to affect me.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you with that. But I want to go back a little bit. Back to Pangea.
Okay.
Right?
That's going way back.
It's going way back.
Yeah.
That's beyond them. That's out of here. That's not even that's not even on the warning track. That's out of here.
Right.
Right? One landmass. Right? You brought up Noah and his family going south. Right? The land began to split. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in Africa, one thing you don't have to worry about is what? Winter.
Right.
Cold weather. So they often say that, I don't know why they call them Caucasians, because the Caucasus Mountains, the people look like me and you. So why they call them Caucasians, I don't know. But anyway, they say that the so-called Caucasian lived in caves,
Yeah.
right? So if they lived in caves, it was probably because they needed shelter and a way to create warmth. So
From a harsh environment.
From harsh environment. So therefore, if they could not be in the sun to get that vitamin D to become melanated, there's going to be a mutation.
Well, here's the thing. Caucasian people, or people that consider themselves white, have the same amount of melanin as we do. The difference is there are two different types of melanin. So for us, we have EU melanin, which produces black and brown. For Caucasian, or people that call themselves white, they produce pheomelanin. And that produces pink, tan, and I think it's orange or something like that. But there is the same amount of melanin that's produced. Does different things, produces different colorations, but they have melanin. If they didn't have any exposure to the sun is just going to burn them.
Burn them, right?
You
so
know what I mean?
I wouldn't. You clarified that, right? And yes, everybody has melanin. I do know that. But just like how you broke it down to the types, right? I believe that because the land mass split and they went into different sides of the equator, right? Further away from the equator, where there were seasons now. And during those seasons, when it was cold, they were in the cave. And I believe, just like with anything, there becomes a mutation. Just like how if you spray for insects, after a while, they build up an immunity to the chemical that normally would kill them.
They do.
Right? There's a mutation. And I believe that in the human race, there was a mutation after the land's mass split from Pangaea, and folks had to live in caves, and I think that's what altered, it's just my opinion, me being the nerd that I am, science,
right?
DNA, that something created a mutation. We talk about mutations all the time. Why would we don't think it would affect us?
Well, you know what? It does. And if you were to do, or just read some of, he just died maybe 5 or 6 years ago. He was a researcher, and I'm trying to recall his name. I could picture his face, but I can picture his face so clearly. But anyway, he talked about his research showed the existence of something he called pink Africans. And how, and I guess this mutation started even before they left the continent, right? Because, now on the continent of Africa, you will find people that we call albinos. So albinism existed in Africa. So yeah, this mutation was happening. And then the name just came to me, Dr. Ivan Van Sertima.
Okay.
So he talked about the existence of pink Africans and I guess this mutation that had begun to take place. And you find that in Africa, there are people indigenous to Africa that are born with blonde hair and blue eyes.
Now, right there. Perfect point. That's why I will not tell my Jewish brothers and sisters that you are not the original Jews of the Bible. That's why I will not. I will not tell them that the Bible's right and somebody's wrong. I'm not going to tell them that because they have their belief, and science tells us that there was these mutations where there are people who look different, and we're all at some point deep down inside we're tribal. So if we have a mutation and we're all from Africa and we're in Africa and there's a mutation, we're going to be tribal. So we're going to mate and choose our mates with people who look like us.
Okay, but now, what you just said, you said, I will not tell Jewish people that they are not the original, right? The original, or the chosen people.
Right.
But should they tell us that you are not the chosen people? If we're going to mutually respect one another, and you say, I'm not going to go to you and say, you're not, should they have the right to say, hey, wait a minute, you definitely are not?
Well, that's my point.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going there and you took it there.
Mm-hmm.
Let people have the right to their belief. What you don't want me to do to you, don't do to me. Because guess what? We know where civilization started. That's why I took it to Pangea.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because this ain't no beat up on anybody conversation that we're having.
Right.
We're talking about the conversation that we need to be having. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, I won't tell you you're not the original and you're not God's chosen people. Right? But because of these mutations, you look the way you look.
Right.
Right? And I look the way I look. Right? Well, who's to say that I can't be the chosen people?
Absolutely.
So therefore, your belief is your belief, right? And you're entitled to it. My belief is my belief, and I'm entitled to it. But at the same time, I'm going to respect you and your beliefs. You respect me and my beliefs. Don't work against me and don't try to hold me down because of our differences. Because like I always say, the same things that divide us are the things that unite us. Mm-hmm. Because guess what? When the shit hit the fan, it don't matter who you in that damn battlefield with.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because guess what? After 9/11, that was the most cohesive time in American history, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Because we no longer had an issue with each other.
Right.
You know what I mean? We no longer had everybody, even the Native Americans who were treated the worst.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was all about the red, white, and the blue. And we had to come together as a people and go out there and conquer the world.
We have problems with others, right? We deflected our problems away from each other, and we said, okay, now the enemy is the Arab, right? Because we labeled them terrorists, right? Which we probably shouldn't have done in hindsight. But, you know, when it comes to belief, right? Beliefs are powerful things. You know what I mean? People will go through life saying, I believe I'm going to go to heaven. And I'm going to follow this path that has been prescribed by the Bible and my values and my morals and what was taught to me by my parents. I'm going to stick to this because I'm going to go to heaven. So beliefs are very, very powerful. And if a person has a belief and it's just as powerful, should you label that person's beliefs anti-Semitic? And what happens once you say that my beliefs are anti-Semitic? You have completely negated my belief. You have now labeled me something that now makes me the object of scorn. Something that now affects my basketball career, my entertainment career, affects my career on the job, no matter what I do. Because now I have been labeled anti-Semitic. Is that fair?
No, that's not fair at all. But I can tell you this.
Mm-hmm.
I have a good friend. One of my best friends, I could say, growing up in the most impressionable years of my life. His name was Alan Lowy, right? And he and I would talk
mm-hmm.
about the differences between the Jewish culture and the Black culture. We've all been enslaved. Our histories are virtually identical, right? And you know, he used to make a joke and say, "I was born a Jew, and I'll die a Jew."
Mhm.
But technically speaking, I'm really not a Jew. That's what he would say to me. Not saying that he was denouncing his heritage.
Mhm.
He was just saying the way he lived. And he said, we talked about Christianity, and he taught me about, you know, Judaism,
Mhm.
right? He said, you know what your biggest problem is? And this was just his opinion. He said, you all put too much emphasis on the Bible. He said, they're just stories. He said, you know, the Torah, first 5 books of the Bible. All the rest of that stuff is stories, according to them, how they believe. He said that, and because of the church, you all go to church, you all got great music, the pastor preaches. He says the difference is you all spend too much time in religion and in spiritual bondage that is being taught to you in church.
Mhm.
Whereas we go to the synagogue and we do what we do and we stick to what we do, and then we're building our community.
Absolutely.
Then we get to the business of building and empowering our community. When in the black church, you went past the first 5 books of the Bible, you went to all the stories in the back of the book, and you're so stuck in that you don't have time to build your community.
Mhm.
You don't have time to educate anybody because you're stuck, right? And he said, you all believe in heaven and hell. I said, well, don't you believe in heaven and hell?
No.
He told me, no, I'm a Jew.
Mhm.
I'm Jewish. No, there's no heaven or hell. This is it.
Mhm.
He said, this is it right here. He said, the problem is you all believe and were taught from slavery that there's a heaven and a hell.
And see, that's what I mean about belief being so powerful, right? That people believe these things. And, as it relates to religion, I will never again be part of an organized religion because it occurs to me that people enslave one another, murder one another, subjugate one another, colonize one another under the banner of religion.
Absolutely.
People fight wars under the banner of religion. Right?
Absolutely.
So, and we believe there's only one God. So if there's one God, why is everybody fighting in the name of this one God? And who benefits? God don't benefit from war, but who does? So that's why I will never be part of an organized religion again, because I see the subjugation. I see where people are manipulated, in the name of God to go off and fight. My religion is greater than yours. Your religion does this, and that's not right. And our religion is so great that we need to kill all of you. So, is that what God intended?
I don't believe God intended any of that.
No. This is something that is created
by
by
men.
men,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
In order to have absolute control, right? Control over how we think, how we react to things, the ability to tell us, okay, look, you need to go fight this war against these people who are different. Well, if they're different, yeah, they're different. They don't practice religion like you. They don't speak like you. They're not good, wholesome people like you.
But
so
see,
you go off and kill them.
But you see, that goes back to the TP Square and the Al Lowy conversations. And by the way, Al Lowy gave me that name, TP Square.
Oh, really?
Back in 1987.
Right.
He gave me that name, TP Square.
Mm-hmm.
And it stuck, But Al taught me so much about the differences,
mm-hmm.
right? And like I said, I respect my Jewish brothers and sisters because of the realm they work in.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because their reality is there's no heaven or hell.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not selling that to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Your heaven is right here on earth, you know, and when you die, you're not coming back. In fact, you're not even going to know you're dead, you know. And the thing is, in the religion, the modern day Christian religion, you know, they taught us to believe in a heaven and a hell.
Absolutely.
Right? They taught us all these things through religion to keep us in bondage, to keep us asleep.
Mm-hmm.
Because while we are following the leader, right, and we're trying to fulfill what the leader said is our destiny. That's why the Bible can tell you to, you know, be a good slave.
Mm-hmm.
You know, well, when did that get put into the Bible? You know what I mean? But if we use the Bible as a rule of thumb and we focus all our lives around it, think of our old great grandparents and all the things they went through in life, right? They would still come home, they would go to church, they would have their Bible, they would sing their hymns, and they would hum and pray and pray and pray. And you know, sometimes what do you do when you pray so much that you got blood on your knees?
Right.
When do you stop? Right? So I use science and history to shape and mold my beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I'm not going to tell anybody they're wrong for their beliefs, but I don't have, and I'm not going to tell them they're right. They're your beliefs, and I don't think you should be labeled for your beliefs. You know what I mean? And because you share a video that you didn't make, right?
Mm-hmm.
And trust me, for that video to be made, the people who run Hollywood and run the business knew about that video and probably financed that video.
You know, I if you look at it, right, I think this was basically a production, and the guy's name is on it who actually made the film, right? I don't think they went through the normal channels. I think this is something that they produced on their own.
Okay.
And it's distributed by Amazon. So they went after Kyrie Irving, but they didn't go after Jeff Bezos.
Right.
Jeff Bezos is still selling
the book
and the
video.
DVD. Right. So how is it Kyrie Irving cannot get out on the court, but Jeff Bezos can continue to rake in billions of dollars off the sale of a film or a documentary, if you will, that people are saying is anti-Semitic? Why isn't Jeff Bezos being called anti-Semitic?
Well, let me ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
Why have people been afraid to call Donald Trump an anti-Semite?
You know, I think with Trump, right?
Because the reason I'm asking that is because I think this man has said and done more things to prove that he's everything that the world used to be against. You know, and you know, and some people going back to religion, they talk about, you know, the devil.
Mm-hmm.
He would turn everything that's good bad.
Mm-hmm.
And he would convince people to think what's wrong is right.
Mm-hmm.
So I look at a guy like Donald Trump. He labeled all the people from Central America,
yes,
thugs, rapists, that blah, 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 right? Is that racist? Was that wrong for him to do that? He has a book that has been proven on the side of his bed that was written by Hitler.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody knows it.
Mein Kampf, right?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Should he be labeled an anti-Semite because he chose to read that book? Even if you look at him now
mm-hmm.
on TV as he turned his stiff neck and his stiff body, right? Look how he's shaping his haircut. All he needs is the little mustache now, because his hair is thin and he got it cropped over. He got a haircut. You know what I mean? You can clearly see that his influence in everything that he says and does is influenced by the world's most notorious Semite and racist.
Okay, so here's the thing with Donald Trump. The Trump family comes from Germany.
Absolutely.
Right? Okay. So a lot of people in this country were influenced by Adolf Hitler. In fact, Adolf Hitler was the Time Magazine Man of the Year in 1933. Right? So he had a lot of admirers here. For Donald Trump to have that book, okay,
by the way,
considered anti-Semitic? Absolutely. However,
by the way, it's also sold on Amazon.
Right. Donald Trump, throughout his presidency, supported Israel's policies. Donald Trump did nothing to affect the amount of aid Israel gets. If anything, he increased it. Donald Trump also, if you remember, moved the capital, supported moving the capital of Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, something that had been disputed for decades, right? Jerusalem is a holy city to 3 different religions. So because of that, the compromise was Israel's capital would be Tel Aviv, right? Well, Donald Trump said, no, I will support the move to Jerusalem, which angered the Muslim world.
Right. That's why, and he moved the consulate from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem.
So, you know what it is, Donald Trump may have these beliefs. You know, he may read the book, but his actions do not suggest that he's anti-Semitic in any way. He makes sure that he supports Israel. And he says in every presence says we are friends of the Israeli people.
Didn't they say that the greatest trick that the devil ever pulled was to convince people he didn't exist? Well, sometimes you have to outdumb people, right? See, for me, I'm a guy that you can't outstick a can of oil because I'm too literal. I look at what you say and what you do, but I know you're doing certain things for a reason, because guess what? Donald Trump was in bed. He did something amazing for the state of Israel. No doubt about it. Right? But at the same time, he went on the other side of the fence and cut crazy Eddie deals with the enemies of Israel. Right? Now, you know, for years, an Israeli plane could not fly in Saudi airspace. You can't. Don't come up. We're shooting you down if you come over here, right? They're arch enemies. Well, he gave concessions to the Israel, and he gave concessions and munitions to the Saudis in exchange for finances through Jared Kushner and everybody else, because all the people attached to him got money from the Saudis, even to the point where he allowed the Saudis, who we know back the 9/11 situation to a degree, to come here and do their golf tournament. When did they start playing golf in the Middle East? What's the purpose?
Well, I'll tell you something, right?
But I'm going to stop right there because I'm about to get in trouble.
Well, you know what? It's all about business, right? You know, right now, gas prices are averaging about $4 a gallon. And I saw where one of the Saudi members of the royal family said that we have exceeded or gone beyond the point of peak oil. So now production will slow, right? Because we have used up a good percentage of the world's reserve of petroleum. So because of that, gas prices are expected to spike. Is that the case? Have we used that much fossil fuel? Probably. Should we have gotten away from fossil fuel? Absolutely. Decades ago, right? But we didn't, because the major oil companies said there's a lot of money in this black gold coming out of the ground. So even though we were destroying the environment, who cares? Stock prices are high. Even though people in this country and around the world have died for oil, I don't care. Stock prices are high. So for businessmen, Saudi businessmen, okay, so the royal family, the Saudi royal family, who knows how much money they have? But I do know that the vast majority of their wealth is in 6 American banks, and 5 of them in New York.
Well, guess what?
So yes, they're controlling the economy.
You know who owns Citibank, right?
Yeah.
The Saudis.
Exactly. But you know what? Man, there's a conversation that can go on and on, right? And it was just good that we could just sit and kick it, because a lot of stuff, brothers don't have a platform like this where they can come and they can speak out and share their ideas and have people listen and, agree or disagree, right? So it's just good when brothers can just sit down and kick it. You know what I mean? It would be nice if Romane was here and she could, interject from the female energy. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But she'll be back with us soon. But, I just want to know, for people who are listening, give us your comments, what you think, because nobody knows it all. Share with us, give us your input, your thoughts, reach out to us and let us know, what do you think about this issue? Do you think that Kyrie, Kanye, and now Dave Chappelle are being treated fairly or unfairly? And also, I guess the next question that I would pose is, do you think it's time that the Black community and the Jewish community sit down and have a heart-to-heart conversation where we talk about these issues, where we come to some kind of understanding so that there is no, offensive dialogue that goes back and forth. And maybe we can put some of these things to rest. But anyway, it's another good hour with your brother TP. And we're going to be back. We're going to have some other, brother days. And we're just going to kick it as brothers. So I thank y'all for listening. And I hope y'all have a wonderful weekend. And we'll see you next week.
Absolutely.